Welcome to the week one go-to session for creative presentation. First of all, welcome everybody. Welcome to CRP. That's what we tend to call this class. It's a lot easier than saying creative presentation. First of all, welcome aboard. I hope that you're all excited to be here. I'm guessing this is, for most of you, your very first class at Full Sail, although we get a few people are taking it for the second time. But most of you are probably pretty new. So first of all, welcome. I hope you're excited. I want you to use that excitement in this first month course. This is sort of, it's an introduction to important principles that you're going to use throughout your Full Sail education. But in addition, it's just important to get off on the right foot. And I think being excited about where you are is an important key to that. I've been with Full Sail now for 2.5 years, and I love it here. I actually like it a lot more than the many other traditional places that I've taught. It's an innovative school. We have innovative students. Some are sort of more on the artsy side of things. So we have film people and music people, and then we have people who are studying more sort of mainstream, but mainstream, but still artistic disciplines like web design or digital design or mobile app development. But regardless of your field of study, welcome aboard. You are in the right place. Like I said, I love teaching here. I love working with Full Sail students. So if I'm excited, you should be too. So use that excitement, okay? It's important. Probably a lot of you know what you've gotten into. Full Sail moves fast. Classes are only a month long. I don't know what sort of track you're on in terms of total length of the program that you're in, but things move fast. And so, keeping a positive attitude, being excited will help, I think, get you through a lot of that. Okay. Some basic info about me. There's my beautiful picture, which looks more like a mugshot than a faculty photo. But yeah, I've been teaching for 15 years. Most of it's been in a more traditional environment. So that means, showing up on a physical campus, walking into a classroom and teaching. I have a background in film. I've taught introduction to film. I'm not a professional musician, or I've never taught music, but I do play piano. My real background is in creative writing, specifically fiction writing. And this is important because you'll find that whatever class you take here, whether it's a class specific to your field of study or not, you'll find that most of your Full Sail instructors have a pretty broad knowledge area. Okay, we're often interested in the same things you guys are. That's another thing that makes Full Sail an exciting place. Like, this is the one place where I get to talk about, maybe not in this class, creative presentation, but in other classes, popular music or video games or film, things that I couldn't quite really do in other places that I've taught. And so that's another reason to be excited. Most of your faculty will have pretty broad interests, and actually it's kind of a requirement to teach here. So we're sort of a different faculty than maybe you've encountered in other environments, whether it was at high school or another sort of college level class. What do we expect from you? Well, I've already mentioned one. I mean, channel that excitement, channel that energy, use it to succeed, not just in this class, but in the future classes you're going to take at Full Sail. Other than that, I mean, in terms of basic expectations we have from students, first of all, ask questions, okay? We instructors really are live human beings. I know this is an online class. Some people are a little bit nervous about online classes. They've never taken one before. This is a class that, regardless of whether you're in Orlando as a campus student or whether you're taking courses online, so you're living in California or Boise, Idaho, or Vermont, all students are in the same boat, okay? It's online for everyone, and it can be a little bit disorienting, but it shouldn't be. I would actually argue that you have more access to your instructors in this format than you would in a traditional classroom. Because, for example, I check the FSO platform several times a day. I'm pretty quick at responding to messages, whereas in a traditional environment, I'd go in, teach, and if students had questions, they might ask them in class, they might not, and then I wouldn't hear from them, between class sessions. Whereas now I hear from students much more often. I'm happy to report that I've heard from several of you already. So keep that up. While we're talking about expectations, let me quickly shift to the course platform. Okay, so here's our class, creative presentation. Hopefully you've already been reading through this initial material on your own. Just a couple quick points I want to make. If you need to send me a message, please try to do so using the envelope icon. okay, up here. You'll notice if you go into specific assignments, whether they're graded or ungraded. So I'll go into the, excuse me, the course overview real quickly. You do have this option to leave comments under activities. Things are loading a bit slowly here, but for example, here you can leave a comment for me. That's fine, and I do try to keep my eyes open for them. The problem is if you leave comments under activities, it gets sent to this area up here, this little bell, which is the notifications area. The issue is I get notifications no matter what you do. For example, someone submitted an assignment, someone posted to the discussion board, right? So like if you cough or if you sneeze, I get a notification. And so if you leave me comments under activities, yes, I'll try to keep my eyes open for them. I get email alerts when comments are waiting for me, but sometimes, my day might end at 5 p.m. and I might not check email at all until the next morning. However, there's probably a pretty good chance I will visit the course site. So if you send me a message directly, my little envelope icon lights up. If you leave me a comment under an activity, that doesn't happen. Again, I try to keep my eyes open for those, but if you need a quick response, it's better to use the direct message function. I only mention this because sometimes students end up leaving lots of comments in lots of different places, and even though I try my best, sometimes some of those can slip by. Otherwise, I think the platform is pretty user-friendly, but if you do have any questions, just let me know, or you can ask them in this session. Okay, let me get back to my presentation. Okay, so what can you expect from us? Basically, this is a pretty open-ended class. I mean, there are assignments to be handed in, and they do have parameters, but you also have a great deal of freedom in this class. And we instructors look at ourselves more as mentors. And if you've already started some of the textbook readings, you probably have an idea what that means. Okay, so we're sort of more of a guide for this first month class. We do give feedback. We do give detailed feedback. We answer questions. We participate in the discussion boards. So it doesn't mean that we're absent. If anything, we're probably more involved than maybe instructors you've had at other places. That said, I mean, it's a different sort of environment here at Full Sail. Okay, so we instructors tend to look at ourselves as more of mentors or guides to your education rather than people who are just here to dispense knowledge that you have to memorize and spit back at us. But basically, I already covered the other important thing, which is that, yeah, you can expect from us that we'll be on top of things and that we'll respond to your messages pretty quickly. I have practically no life, so I have nothing better to do. So if you ever get a response from me at like 3 in the morning, that probably just means that I was awake at 3 in the morning and checking for messages. So you can expect pretty dedicated, instructive feedback from us. And I think that's important because in an online environment, again, especially if you're not a campus student, some people can feel disconnected or they can feel like it's not a real class. And that's not the case. Here at Full Sail, we take classes pretty seriously, whether they occur on campus or whether they occur online. And obviously, the more engaged you stay with the class, the more engaged you'll continue to feel. So take advantage of this. Take advantage of that. We instructors are real people. That's another reason why we hold these weekly go-to sessions. So you get the feeling of what the kind of the equivalent of a classroom session. But yeah, don't feel like you're on an island. Don't feel like you're disconnected. We are here to help, to have conversations, to help you guide you through the month. Just a real quick comment about copyrighted materials. I'm going to actually revisit this idea later in the session. But Full Sail has a pretty strict policy about copyright issues, and with good reason. We're going to be dealing with visual projects this month in the form of presentations, and we live in a world now because of social media where we share images, we share videos, but a lot of what you see isn't technically permissible. Right? Like how many videos are on YouTube that have to be taken down, or how many videos on YouTube should be taken down technically because the person doesn't own the copyright to that music or that image. So at Full Sail, we really stress the adherence to copyrighted materials. So basically, you're not allowed to take just any image that you find online or any. Later we'll talk in the month about your presentations that you'll create. You won't be able to take a Rihanna song and have it playing in the background. Full Sail is really, really strict on this, and again, with good reason. All of you, and I mean all of you, are entering industries where these are pretty important issues. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're in web design or music or film. You're not just going to be able to grab whatever you want and use it without giving credit to it. So just keep that in mind. I'll revisit that a little bit later. Okay, this is also your introduction to sort of college level writing standards. The good news is this isn't an English class. By the way, I also teach English here at Full Sail, so you might see me again. English is a month 4 course for online students. If you're a campus student, it's probably going to be a month 2 class. There are college level writing standards. You can read more about them in the introductory documents that are on the course platform. Basically, there is an adherence to basic grammatical rules at this level. So the ability to write in complete sentences, the ability to avoid text speak, right? So, typing the capital letter I for the pronoun instead of lowercase I, or typing the word and instead of using the symbol for and, a basic knowledge of punctuation. At this level, that's sort of where the stress is. The writing standards get a little bit more intense as you move on, especially as you enter English class. So just a quick reminder that there is some attention paid to writing in this class. Okay, so you have 2 textbooks. Hopefully some of you have started the readings. There are 2 texts for this class. One is called Resonate, the other is called Slideology. They're both written by the same author, who I believe is in the next slide, Nancy Duarte. She's someone who is an entrepreneur and a CEO. She also has lots of experience as a communications expert. That's why we're using her materials. And real quickly, if I could go to the textbook. Have people been checking out the textbook, by the way? Has anybody want to show off and say that they've already started some of the readings? Okay, so here's the textbook, Resonate. Okay, Siobhan has, good. Dustin has read chapter 1. Okay, awesome. You have a link to this textbook in one of the activities on the platform. I forget what it's called. Right, reading activities, Resonate. This week we're only dealing with Resonate. Next week we'll get into Slideology, so I don't have Slideology up, but we'll look at that next week. It's a different kind of book. Most of you are pretty tech savvy, so I don't think you'll have problems moving around. If you are confused, it's probably simplest just to go up here, and then you can access any chapter that you want, for example, like chapter 1. Okay, and if you click on the chapter, it's kind of set up like almost like a slideshow. So you just click on the arrow to move forward, and you can do the readings. They're not terribly long, and they have nice little multimedia functions that you can click on and watch certain things. But the readings are important because some of your assignments will require you to connect your ideas to what you've read in the textbook. It also lays an important foundation for a lot of what we'll be discussing. And Nancy Duarte, I don't know, she has a kind of sense of humor. There are often examples that are sort of down to earth, so it's not like a dry textbook, and it is multimedia enhanced, so that should hopefully keep your attention as well. We try to keep the readings pretty light, so there are 4 chapters to get through this week. I don't think that's too much to ask for. Try to read things completely. I'm not against, I shouldn't say skimming, because skimming to some people means ignoring large sections of text. But obviously, if you can read even at the level of gist and get the main ideas out of each chapter, that's probably what's most important. Okay, so there are the textbooks. There are 2 of them for this month. The Resonate is more, even though it has multimedia components, it is more about the ideas of presentations, what makes presentations successful, what to avoid. Whereas Slideology is more about the nuts and bolts, about visuals and how to use visuals in presentations. So in that sense, both textbooks work well together. And those are the 2 textbooks for the class. Okay, so we've already looked at the textbook. I am going to go over some of the concepts that present in the textbook. I'm not going to do so in detail. So I'm actually going to move a little bit quickly because after all, this is a reading assignment. So if I cover everything in detail, then there wouldn't be much reason to read the chapters. But Nancy Duarte has this idea of resonance, right? That's why the book is called Resonate. And And she actually explains it if you've read chapter 1 already, right? Resonance is this sort of scientific term where an object responds to something if, an external stimulus, if it's operating at the same frequency as that object. And she gives kind of a clever personal story about her son who conducted an experiment um, using salt and sound frequencies, and how the salt responded to that level of frequency and moved around and formed patterns. And the metaphor should seem pretty obvious. That's what you're trying to do as a communications expert, right? You're trying to reach your audience. And the way you do that is by operating on the same frequency as your audience. If you're unable to do that, and some people have already participated in the week 1 discussion where you had to reflect on your past experiences with public speaking or giving presentations. But I already saw some people mentioning about how, their presentation experience maybe wasn't that great. And afterwards they realized it was because it was dull or dry, or they realized that their audience wasn't paying attention. Now, that might have been because your audience just weren't very nice people, right? In high school, sometimes when it's time to give speeches or presentations, your classmates might not be the most receptive people in the world. So it may not have anything to do with you. It might. Maybe your presentation could have been improved, but it might also have been, in part, the audience and their feelings. But ideally, what we're trying to do is reach our audience, okay? To make them resonate, to make them hum, to make them buzz. And that's sort of Duarte's kind of metaphor for the entire textbook. This is important because no matter what industry you're heading into, ideas and how you communicate ideas are pretty important. Okay, we often think about certain, for example, specific businesses, right? Specific large corporations. They either succeed or fail because of things like stock reports or statistical analysis or interior reports. And even though all that stuff is important, facts, statistics, data are not the only important thing. I would argue that a huge issue of importance for success, not just at the business level, but even the personal level, is your ability to communicate ideas. And there are techniques you can use that make the exchange of ideas either more successful or less successful. So let me give a quick example. When we think about, for example, Microsoft versus Apple, I don't know how old everybody is in the room. Usually my students are kind of on the younger side, though we sometimes have a few older students as well. But there was a time in the 80s and 90s where Microsoft was king. Like, it was impossible to imagine a world in which Microsoft didn't control everything. But that's no longer true, right? I mean, Microsoft is still an incredibly powerful company. Don't get me wrong. But they've been surpassed. I mean, who are the movers and shakers now? Apple? Google? Am I leaving out another important big business that has sort of taken charge nowadays? But there's been a sort of reversal. Again, not a complete reversal. Microsoft is still doing just fine. But Apple, which was actually in the opposite position, back in the 90s, Apple was lost in the wilderness. Okay, it was hard to envision a world in which Apple could turn things around. They had such a small market share. They kept making bad product decisions. And what happened? Steve Jobs came back, turned the company around, and in large part because of the communication of ideas. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this person's name correctly, Rashad. He mentioned Samsung. Okay, good. Yeah, Samsung, the Galaxy, right? Like, Microsoft has kind of been left in the dust because when it came to mobile devices, they simply didn't really pay much attention to that. They kept putting energy and effort into their already established product lines, PCs, when the entire environment was going much more mobile. Where was I? Oh, yeah, I was talking about Apple. Apple completely turned things around. And I actually read an article in the New Yorker a couple months ago about, I forget the guy's name, but he was basically like Steve Jobs' sort of second in command. He was more on the design end. So the reason Apple products look so sleek and cool is largely because of him. Anyway, it was a fascinating article. But what was really fascinating about it was it sort of gave a glimpse into how Apple operates. It's a much more innovative environment. There's a much more free-flowing exchange of ideas. And of course, ideas typically get communicated in some form of or another in terms of a presentation. I also read an article, by the way, about Microsoft and how they were the complete opposite, how just structurally they were sort of a bit backwards. Kind of following a more rigid framework, not being open to innovation. Anyway, my point here is I don't want to get lost in issues that interest me, perhaps more than you, is that it's not just facts, statistics, and data that drive a person's success or a business's success. It's also the communication of ideas, and typically that communication of ideas occurs at the level of a presentation. Okay, that industries thrive through change. And change can be difficult, right? Nobody likes change. I'm going to be moving at the end of the month. I hate moving. I don't want to move. I don't want to change. But successful, both people and businesses tend to thrive when they change. And we could give example after example, right? Like, you know, even though Walmart's doing just fine, they could have become the equivalent of Amazon.com, but they sort of fell asleep at the wheel when the internet came on the scene, allowing other people to sort of step in and be successful. But yeah, the industry thrives upon change. Okay, one of the things Nancy Duarte mentions in her chapter, I believe it's chapter 1, is that presentations have the potential to be boring. So here I'm going to turn things over to you, and as I've already mentioned, it's a little bit awkward because you can't see each other's chat comments, which I admit is kind of annoying, but I can see them and I can read them out loud. Has anybody been trapped in a boring presentation, and what made it boring? Let's get some ideas flowing here. Like, what makes a presentation boring? Even if you haven't read the chapters, what are things you just know intuitively that make you tune out as a listener, okay, or as an audience member? Can we identify some things that aren't very successful? Siobhan says, yes, the way the presenter was talking and delivering the message. Dustin says, no emotion. Rashad said, yes, just facts, facts, and more facts. Okay, lots of different things there, right? So a couple people already stressed the importance of emotion, the importance of having a sort of personal presence. Okay, that's key. Like, I love being in front of people. I'm actually a pretty shy and reserved person in real life, but when I, for example, teach in a physical classroom, I like walking out on because I view it as sort of a stage, and I know how to move around. I know how to use gestures. I know how to look at different parts of the audience. And part of me realizes that I need to do those things because if I didn't, I would just be standing up there in the center of a room, stiff as a board, or even worse, reading from, I don't know, a piece of paper. And nobody wants that, right? That's a quick way to make people sort of tune out. Other people, Rashad says no audience interaction. Some of these names, I'm not sure. If I mispronounce names, I do apologize. Sajan says monotone speakers. Yeah, that's like a huge problem for me because you know how you can't hear yourself? Which is why when you do hear yourself, you can't believe that that's you. You think, who is that person? For me, it's always terrible because when I hear my voice, I think I kind of sound like a toad. I have this really dry and dull voice. So yeah, one of the things I need to do when I'm teaching is sort of be more emphatic, more energized than I typically am in real life. So yeah, and I realize that because it would be a huge limitation for me to just come out and be the person I typically am, which is sort of low key, because that's not very powerful. Jelana says really bad body language. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that. What are examples of bad body language? Um, I think of bad body language as like the person who just doesn't know how to move, right? The person who just sort of stands there. Or maybe you've had this experience if you remember speech class in high school or classes that you've taken maybe at a community college or another 4-year school where you have to take a speech class or a presentation class, right? There's always that student who gets up there with a sheet of paper and just stands there. I shouldn't laugh because I've been in that situation, right? And just reads off the paper. So her eyes are down. And what does that do to the audience? Do you really want to sit there while someone just stands there, not moving, eyes down? Are you going to connect with that sort of delivery? Or are you going to respond to someone who knows how to move around the room, who knows how to make eye contact with different segments of the audience? Yeah, Jamie says someone who paces too much. Okay, so maybe there's something there too. Some people might be too expressive. I just want to check to see if I've missed any comments. Siobhan says reading word from PowerPoint. Yeah, we've been talking more about the speaker's presence, but there are issues about the presentation itself as well. For example, in this session that I'm delivering, I prefer simple visuals and not very much text. And some programs like PowerPoint are sort of designed, I think, badly, because what do? You open up PowerPoint, you pick a theme, and it's set up almost to encourage text, right? You start typing in a title for that slide. It automatically invites you to start typing in text in the body using bullet points. But who wants to really read like a lot of text up on the screen? Plus, if there's so much text on the screen, then what do you even need a speaker for? So I know just in my own presentation style, I prefer to have simple visuals and then just use those visuals as a way to remind me of what I need to talk about. Okay, lots of great stuff. It seems like a lot of you know then what can make presentations sort of boring. And I do have to say that I do like the commentary that's already been posted to the discussion board, and I already started jumping in today and responding to a few of you. But some of you, I think, even reflected that, hey, I once did a presentation, it didn't go terribly well, or I realized after the fact that it was too dry, too boring, or that I lacked confidence. Okay, so most people kind of know these things, but I would argue that sometimes you have to go through it first to realize what those flaws are. I've delivered lots of bad presentations. I've created lots of bad presentations. I've created those PowerPoint slides that are just text on a gray slide with bullet points, and who wants to sit through that? So that's one of the things that's kind of cool about this class, because it's designed to introduce you to the world of sort of visual elements. Because even though some of you right now are thinking, I'm never going to have to create a presentation outside of this class or outside of Full Sail, I'm never going to have to open PowerPoint or Keynote, or some of you may have heard of an online tool called Prezi, which is sort of fancy 3D looking presentation software. It's entirely online, but it's sort of like PowerPoints and Keynote, just a bit fancier visually. Some of you might be thinking, well, I'm never going to use that stuff, but you will. Maybe not those specific tools, but who doesn't have to embrace visuals now in 2015? Right? I mean, we're such a visual-driven community. Even when it comes to like a Facebook page, which maybe doesn't have that much range for customization, still there are little things you can do to make your Facebook page stand out. Some of you might have experience setting up websites. Some of you might be, blogging was, I'd say, more popular 10 years ago or so. But some people still blog. Some of you who are going into, for example, music, I mean, you're going to have to create a presence, an online presence that will require visuals. Sure, if you become rich and famous, someone will do that for you. But early on, you're going to have to do some of those things yourself. So you can't avoid sort of the visual importance of what it means to be living in 2015. And I'll actually get off my soapbox because I think most of you know that, right? Is there anybody here who's not aware of that? By the way, as I go to the next slide, does anybody here have examples of already how they're embracing visual elements in, let's say, a real world context? Does anybody have a website? Does anybody have a blog? Has anybody had to deal with visuals and kind of presenting yourself today in 2015? Because, by the way, what we're working toward eventually is at the end of the class, we're going to do a branding assignment where you'll create your own personal brand and you'll create a presentation based on that personal brand. So if you haven't thought much about these issues until now, you're going to have to think about them in this class. Rashad says, for those in music production, you have to have this to create your music portfolio or music videos. Okay, so when I think of the music industry, I can't imagine someone who wants to succeed and doesn't have a personal brand, doesn't have a personal presence that goes beyond just, walking out on stage or meeting people face to face. But I'm guessing that's important in other industries too. Do we have any digital design people or web design? As I go to the next slide, why don't we have everybody just quickly type into the chat what you are here to study? It will also just sort of satisfy my curiosity. Okay, Siobhan, music production. Dustin, music production. Jelana, computer animation. Rashad, music production. Lots of music production people. Okay, cool. Williams, audio production. Yeah, we do get a lot of music production people here. Typically, it's not so music production heavy in these go-to sessions. But yeah, that's awesome. And again, the music, I think the music people know this. But I'd say even people in other industries know this as well. And let's look at a quick example, okay? About how something as simple as a quotation or an image changes impact. So let's begin with a quote. Okay, this is from Socrates. Education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. Okay, I like that quote. Because what is it saying in essence? It's sort of what I echoed at the very beginning of the session, that education is really about creating a spark. I mean, yes, we hope you gather information in this class. We hope you find this information valuable and that you learn something from it. But real education starts with that spark, right? You're interested in something and it sort of sets you on a path to continue that learning. Education isn't really about memorizing facts or figures and being able to spit them out. You don't just take a class and say, okay, that class is over. I never have to think about that again. Okay, actually, maybe some of you do think that at times when you think back to your former classes. But ideally, hopefully, a spark has been lit, and then the education continues even after the class is over. And that's sort of what this quote is indicating, right? Education is about sparking or kindling that flame, not just the filling of a vessel. Okay, education isn't about me pouring facts and figures into your head like you're an empty vessel. Okay, education is about more than that. But notice, okay, right now it's just a quote on the screen. If I were giving this presentation like I'm doing now, or if it were in a live environment with a real audience sitting before me, I mean, yeah, this quotation might get people's attention, but it might not. But look what happens if I pair it with the right image. Okay, so here's the same quote with a completely different image. And the image sort of shapes things, right? I mean, here the whole idea of education is, rooted in a spark, not just filling up the brain with random facts and statistics, is sort of made more powerful by this image, right? Because it has a sort of social connotation here. Um, it suggests that even in certain environments where people are struggling, education is still important, right? Maybe this little boy who's wandering up to what looks like an impromptu classroom that's occurring under the underpass of a freeway, maybe education is still taking place. Maybe this kid is going to be sparked, right? On the other hand, consider this image, which might be a little bit dated. Does anybody catch this reference? I don't know how familiar students are with films that are like 25 years old. um, I'm waiting to see if any. Okay, Dustin said Bill and Ted. Do people still know that movie, or is that one of those movies that's like nobody remembers it anymore? I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, this is from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Siobhan says she's never heard of it. Yeah, Dustin says he's 31. Okay, that's closer. I'm 30. Actually, my birthday. Congratulate me. Say happy birthday, everybody. It is on Thursday, and I'm proud to say I am turning 30 for the 14th straight year. I refuse to accept that I'm not. I'm getting old. Okay, so yeah, this comes from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's basically a comedy from the early 80s about two time-traveling stoners who go back in time. They're such kind of imbeciles that they keep referring to Socrates, who's pictured here, as Socrates. That's what they call him, Socrates. Obviously, it takes now things take a different feel, right? Because it's paired with this image. It's not that the quotation isn't important anymore, because this is actually a scene from the movie where they meet the person who's the speaker of this quote, but it could add an element of humor to your presentation. Humor is something you have to be careful with. You don't want to risk it all the time. You don't want to go overboard. But considering who your audience is, maybe this would get a chuckle, or maybe it would make them pay attention to this quote because they connect with this film. It would, they might remember how goofy this film was, the fact that these two stoners actually meet this famous Greek philosopher. On the other hand, as we've already heard from a couple people here, that slide might not go over well with the audience at all if it's filled with, for example, an entire room of, say, high school students who might not get this reference. But again, image changes everything. And of course, here's more of a classical image. So if you were to kind of deliver this image straightforwardly, where here again, the famous Greek philosopher is shown in a painting. Okay, but still, the idea is that we can pair visuals with text and make things more interesting, but that we make those choices, right? And we make choices not based on our desires. We might find that Bill and Ted, let me see if I can go back to it. We might find this person hilarious, but it might be the absolutely wrong choice, depending on our audience. Okay, so what elements are sort of needed as we talk about presentations, our introduction to what presentations are all about. And this is where I'll sort of kind of skim through things quickly because a lot of this is in your textbook reading. But remember that presentations have a beginning, middle, and end. I would even go farther than that and say that all communication does. Okay? Think of a memo. Okay? A memo that might be handed out in an office. It has a beginning, middle, and end. The memo might start with, dear employees, this memo is to inform you of changes we are making to the 401k plan. Right? And then there's a middle where they detail those changes. And then there's some sort of closing. So even if there's minimal text, there's still a beginning, middle, and end. Um, traditional sort of text, whether it's an essay or a newspaper article or a short story, right? They have beginnings, middle, and ends too. So do presentations. We're going to get into the assignments you have to complete this week, but one of the assignments asks you to look at 3 videos of presentations and analyze them in terms of what's working well. And possibly what is not working well. And I think you'll notice that all of those, by the way, you have to choose from and I'll get into this a little bit later in the presentation, but you have to choose from a TED Talk. If you don't know what TED Talks are, I'll briefly show what they are later. But I think you'll notice that whatever TED Talk you choose, and you have to choose at least 3 videos to watch, they'll probably all have a beginning, middle, and end as well. So one of your challenges will be to see if you can spot that in the presentations that you watch to choose to analyze, and also whether you find their structure satisfying or not. It might have a beginning, but is it a successful beginning? But yeah, all communication has some sort of beginning, middle, and end. Just beginning in the middle of things is not an effective way to sort of draw your reader in, or your listener, I should say. Instead of giving examples, because I'm kind of falling a little bit behind time wise, you'll see examples of this in real time in the hopefully TED Talks that you choose to focus on. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about presentations. What makes them effective? What makes them ineffective? Keep in mind that there are 4 types of audience. There are those friendly audiences, right? These are the people who are engaged. They're paying attention to what you're saying. They might smile. Apathetic, which is just a fancy way of saying that they're sort of neither here nor there. They might be staring off into space. They may not care. They might have a posture that suggests that listening to your presentation is the last place on earth they want to be. Okay, then things can get a little bit more negative. You might have an audience that's sort of uninformed, although that's not terribly negative. I love being able to introduce, knowledge to people. Again, it's not about filling their head with just endless facts and figures, but yeah, to introduce concepts to people who maybe hadn't considered them before. And finally, you have the outright hostile audiences. Based on your past presentation experience, and I know some of you have already talked about this on the discussion board, how have your audiences been? If you think back to that high school speech class, or maybe you took a class at another college, where was the majority of your audience falling? Were they friendly? Were they receptive? Were they sort of apathetic? They weren't really paying much attention. Dustin says apathetic. Siobhan says friendly and some were apathetic. Jamie is emphatic by saying apathetic. Corey says apathetic. Okay, good. Nate says friendly. Where did this occur, by the way? High school? College? Because I actually have an answer for why so many people are saying apathetic. Siobhan, college. Jelana says high school. Jelana, if I'm not saying your name correctly, if you could somehow signal how it's supposed to be pronounced phonetically, I'll correct that. Okay, lots of high school. Everybody's saying high school. I would say that the reason that the audience is more apathetic is because think about high school speech class or even college level speech class, right? It's a required class. How many of the presentations? Julana. Okay. Or is that right? Julana or Jelana? Think back to your like a high school speech class. It's a required class. Am I right in assuming that maybe not all the presentations were stellar? Like how many of you had people who just walked up there and stood there and just delivered their presentation as if they didn't want to be there? I'm guessing maybe that's the case for a lot of people. So I wouldn't take that apathy personally. Yes, if there was something about your presentation that could have been improved that was leading to that apathy, then absolutely you should change things. Like I always reflect on my performance. Today, when this session is over, I'll review how this went. And I'll say, wow, I didn't discuss this as well as I would have liked, or I could have been better about that. I mean, that's what you do. But on the other hand, sometimes your audience could lend you a helping hand, right? And that's tough to do when you're, for example, in a high school class or a college class, where you sort of have a captive audience that doesn't want to be there. So yes, reflect on your presentation, how it could be improved, but don't necessarily take it personally if you're met with apathy. Okay, that happens. And by the way, also on the discussion board, a lot of people were saying how they have this fear of public speaking, or they don't like giving presentations. Lots of people don't. Okay, that's pretty common. I think the fear of public speaking is one of the top fears that people have. Um, and we can talk more about that as the month goes on. The good news is, in this class, you're not going to literally stand up in front of people and speak. You'll ultimately be building toward a presentation that includes visual elements, but also you basically recording voiceover. So that will be your equivalent of public speaking. So that should take some of the pressure off. But sometimes that apathetic audience can lead to your feelings of panic. Did that happen to people? You look out in the crowd, people aren't paying attention, right? People are staring out the window, or even more rude, putting their head on the desk and falling asleep. Um, Again, you just can't take that personally. I've already posted this on the discussion board, but I'd say the number one thing to have is confidence. And I know that that's something that's impossible to teach. But when I say confidence, I don't mean cockiness. Actually, let me switch real quickly, because there's this hilarious picture from the textbook reading. Uh, Let me see. I have it bookmarked, or I have it open. Bear with me, because it really is a funny visual. Where is it? Don't tell me that I closed it. Okay, I can't find it. See, and here's an important lesson. I believe it's in chapter 1. Am I already in chapter 1? Yes. See, here's a good example. Like, even though things aren't going the way that I planned right now, I don't stumble, I don't panic, I don't freak out. I'm just going to try to find what I was looking for, and if I can't find it, we'll move on. Oh, here it is. If you read chapter 1, I said that the Nancy Duarte text does have moments of sort of humor, but here she's stressing the importance of that you're trying to connect with your audience. And I think I made this point in the discussion board, but yeah, confidence is not cockiness. I do like to compare uh, delivering a presentation to sort of performance. That when I walk, for example, into a classroom, it's sort of like walking on stage. That doesn't mean that I become an entirely different person. It doesn't mean that I'm acting a role. It just means that I become a sort of more enhanced version of myself. But I don't become like this guy. I love this picture, by the way, right? Like, this is not confidence. This is someone who's, I don't know, either too full of himself, or is so obsessed with self promotion and an image that he's not being sincere. Like, that's not how you connect with your audience. So, one tip that I have is that, yes, I'm not sure if I can teach confidence, but I can say that confidence comes when you're comfortable in your own skin. When you're comfortable in your own skin, you basically give yourself permission to just let things go. It doesn't mean that you don't plan. It doesn't mean that you don't try your best, but it means that you have the sort of confidence to go out, whether it's walking to a classroom or creating the sort of presentation that you'll work on for this class, and to do so, feeling comfortable and confident in yourself. Um, there are times where I've stumbled in front of a classroom and I just laugh it off, or I lose my place and I just look at the students and say, "What was I talking about? Where was I?" And they'll usually chuckle and they'll remind you where you were, and you just move forward. What happens is that early on, if you have a fear of public speaking, or you don't have that confidence, is that if you stumble, or if you look out in that crowd and see those apathetic faces, it throws you off course. And don't let that happen, okay? Because it's not that big of a deal. I know it's a top fear that people have, but in time you'll realize that there's really no reason to feel that way. Okay, let me get through this stuff kind of quickly, because I do want to talk about this week's assignments. When you read through the textbook chapters, Nancy Duarte introduces a couple important concepts. One is the idea of the hero, that she says that too often presentations are written from the presenter's perspective. She gives examples from the business world, where a presenter comes out and immediately starts talking about the company and what our product can do for you. And she says that's the sort of the opposite way of doing things, because you're making yourself the hero. You're making yourself the savior. And what you should do is be putting your audience first, making them the hero. It doesn't mean that you're making your audience like Frodo from Lord of the Rings, or the type of person who goes out and fights dragons. Really, the message is more about putting yourself in your audience's shoes, making things relatable to them, making sure that they can see the value for themselves in the information that you're presenting. And that too often presenters do things from the opposite end of things. Okay, so yeah, again, following this idea that you try to relate to your audience. For this week's assignment, which we'll get into in just a second, some of these issues like hero, maybe you won't see the direct importance of it, but still, you'll have to think about, you're going to watch 3 TED Talks, and you're going to kind of create a document or handout that has some level of visuals, to communicate the information that the assignment requires. But how are you going to do that? Like, what is the most effective way to present that information? And thinking about your audience might be a clue. Your audience isn't me. I mean, I am an audience. I am going to be one who's grading things. But still, like, if you were to present this material to a stranger, like, what would be the best way to communicate that information? Putting yourself in your audience's shoes is pretty important to that. Okay. So yeah, designing a presentation without an audience in mind is like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern. Sometimes it's difficult to guess details about your audience. For example, yeah, if we think about our audience in terms of segments, determining who your audience is, if we think back to that Bill and Ted slide, that might be an awesome visual for certain groups, but it may be a complete failure for others. And I've had times, I try not to go overboard with humor things in presentations, but there have been times where I've taken risks, and sometimes they succeed and sometimes they fail. And sometimes they fail because I'm just not taking audience into account. I'm thinking more about myself than I am about my audience. For that brief moment in that presentation, I looked more like that doofus in that textbook picture. And that's always a reminder to think about my audience first. Actually, we'll skip this slide. There's just your textbook has a lot of really cool multimedia tools, and one of them is you can click on the video of Ronald Reagan delivering the speech about the Challenger disaster, which was something that was almost like 9/11 for people of my generation, because I was in high school in 1986, and it was really this stunning event that had the entire nation captivated. Like, everybody can remember where they were when the Challenger space shuttle exploded in 1986. Even though that's way before your time, it's still an effective video to watch, because not only can you watch the video, but the video shows how different aspects of the presentation, because the president delivering a speech to the nation is a presentation, was very, very specifically crafted to reach different segments of the audience, and to affect them personally. So make sure that you're clicking on those multimedia things that are included in the textbook. That's what makes it sort of a cooler textbook than others. I'm going to fly through this stuff if you don't mind, because it's all in your textbook. But yeah, just another reminder that your audience, the hero, is the hero, not you. Another important concept that Duarte covers in her textbook chapter is this idea of mentor. I actually already covered this earlier when I talked about what we try to do as full sail instructors, right? We're mentors, we're guides. Duarte, in her textbook chapter, she makes lots of pop culture references, so she compares it to like Yoda from the Star Wars movies. I like that comparison. That seems apt. But it's not just something we do as instructors. When you're creating presentations, that's ultimately your goal as well, okay? That you're sort of like a mentor. You're a facilitator. And even though these ideas might seem abstract right now, hopefully they'll become more concrete when you start putting your assignments together, including this very first writing assignment that's going to be due this Sunday. That your goal is to guide the viewer or the reader through the information, and what is the best way to do that? Maybe putting yourself in the role of a mentor, not like a dictator who's just endlessly hitting the reader or viewer with facts and figures and statistics. Maybe a better process is to guide your audience through important points. Okay, I'm gonna skip things. By the way, here's one thing I would reflect on after my presentation. I try to keep things to an hour, because after an hour, I tend to lose people. So one of the things I'll consider is maybe I have to trim some of this material and maybe just rely. I always get nervous because some people are very, very dutiful and read through the textbook information. Some people don't, and I shouldn't have to cover it. But I do try to cover some of the main ideas. Let me switch to the assignments you're going to do for this week, okay? Because that's probably what interests you more. Um, I love that picture. We all know someone like this too, don't we? By the way, the I shouldn't feature this, but the textbook has some pretty risque language, so it's not your typical textbook. So that's another reason why I like it. Okay, so let's look at some of the things you have to do for this week. I'm also going to close some of these tabs. Some of you already jumped into the discussion board. Um, and I have the assignment sheet open here. I'm not going to go over this word for word because the assignment sheet does it. But basically, you're going to share your experience and thoughts regarding public speaking in the past, and you're going to explore these issues, like what's your comfort level delivering presentations. Discuss a public speaking experience that you remember, and whether it was good or bad. Discuss the time you created a visual presentation. What were some of your biggest challenges? And so on. So as long as you're following the details on the assignment sheet, you should be okay. And like I said, it looks like about 9 of you have already jumped into the discussion board and started completing that first activity. So that's awesome. The other big thing we have to work on, though, is this assignment, the 1.4 assignment, which is worth 15% of your grade, and it's due on Sunday. So that's kind of coming up soon. Again, full sale classes move quickly. But let's talk about this a little bit in more detail. Okay, again, I'm not going to read the assignment sheet out loud entirely. You can do that. But you're going to watch a minimum of 3 different TED Talks. Is there anybody here who has never heard of a TED Talk before? I'm going to go to the website. Okay, so John has never heard of it. They're pretty popular, so I find that probably about half the students have heard of them before. If you haven't, they're really cool because it's this whole I don't know how to describe it. It's a nonprofit organization that's devoted to sort of spreading these videos, which typically are on the short side. As you can see, here are a bunch. They're usually about a dozen minutes in length. Some can be a little bit longer, like 20 minutes, but they tend to be short, and they can be on all variety of topics. But what's awesome is that they usually bring in important people, either members from industry or from technology, who give very, very specific talks. And they're awesome because most of them are in that sort of 12 to 15-minute range, is that they're digestible. They don't go on so long that you sort of lose interest. And they're sort of compressed enough that they do include important information, but it's not so long that that it either causes you to lose interest, and that helps too because they become sort of perfect tools for analysis. So your job is to watch 3 of these. You should don't choose something at random. Like here's the math behind basketball's wildest movies. That might personally interest you, right? Like, I'm not a big basketball fan, but I am a baseball fan, and uh, I'm interested in the statistics, the way the statistics have informed not just baseball but all sports, right? That's sort of the big trend right now. So yeah, maybe I would find this fascinating, but not if it's not my industry. On the other hand, we do have a sports marketing and media program here at Full Sail, so maybe this would be of interest to you. Yeah, so you should be choosing something that relates to you. Again, we have over 2,000 videos here on the TED Talk site, so you just have to find things that relate to you. Who wants to give me an idea? The music people, what specific music do you like? Country? Straight pop? Hip hop? Okay, let's see what happens if I put in. Or gospel. Okay, let's go with gospel. I mean, I do love hip hop, but because I know next to nothing about gospel music, I want to see if there's anything that relates to that. There might not be. Okay, there we go. Sorry, we couldn't. Okay, so who said gospel? Was it Rashad? Yeah, you'll just have to choose something different, and you don't have to find something that's 100% on topic. Uh, so you might have to find something that's just about music, or maybe it's not even something about music, but it's something that you feel could relate to your industry. Maybe it's about, I don't know, performance anxiety, and maybe it's not specifically about music, but like that's important to you. Just out of curiosity, because I haven't done much searching here. Let me try out. Oops, entertainment. Okay, so you can search by general topics. Let's see what happens when I click on entertainment. What do you mean you couldn't find a topic like that? Okay, so if we put in music, we get a billion results, but they're pretty general. I wonder what happens if we put in hip hop. Okay, so there are some things here. Playing invisible turntables, My Magic Moves. But you don't have to be that limited. So I'm curious. Does music production come up with anything? No, sorry, we couldn't find anything like that. Okay, so you'll have to be a little bit flexible. I'll let you do the searching instead of wasting time here and coming up with nothing. The TED Talks tend to be more about industry issues, so you probably won't find something that specific. But the goal here is to find something music related, or something video game related, or something technology related. Okay, and as long as it has some connection to your industry, I'm okay with that. So yeah, we're probably not going to find. John says bluegrass. Someone else had mentioned Jay-Z. I doubt there's something specific about Jay-Z, but yeah, it's usually not that specific. If I go back to the main page here, you'll notice that things tend to be kind of broader. Okay, so here's something about child marriage. So there are political issues, there are tech issues. So you'll have to find something that's sort of more general. By the way, if I go back to music, I wonder what stuff just comes up there. Talks. Okay, so here's someone saying why she takes the piano on the road. She's a classical musician, it looks like, but maybe there's something interesting to you. Again, I'll let you go through this, but maybe if you go through just the music stuff, you'll find the importance, like John says, creative writing or songwriting. Again, that might be too specific. And by the way, I'm you're probably thinking that these TED Talks are awful. I can't find anything on the person I like or the music genre I like. Again, TED Talks aren't quite that specific. It's more about educational issues, tech issues, political issues, issues that are sort of current, or issues that are that focus on aesthetics. Right, so it's usually something bigger than a specific genre or a specific personality. Someone said songwriting. Okay, we get some interesting things here. Jackson Brown, that's probably a person before your time. I doubt any of you recognize who that is. But even, sometimes even clicking on something that you don't think relates 100% still might be interesting. Here's Khaki King. Okay, she might next just be the next guitar god. I don't know who she is, but I would watch that. Okay, and there's some other things here. Okay, Jill Solvio, I recognize her. John Legend, okay, we know John Legend. Right? All of Me. That song got played to death so much that even though I like the song, I got tired of hearing it. Sting, How I Started Writing Songs Again. Even if you don't like Sting, maybe there's something interesting there. So yeah, you can find something that matches the assignment. So John said asked something specific about the assignment. Do you want us to identify a beginning, middle, of end? If I go back to the assignment sheet, you sort of have the instructions here. So first you'll watch 3 different TED Talks. Then you'll consider these questions. Okay. Why was the presentation powerful? Why did you like the presentation? What made it appealing? How did the speaker draw you in? So John asked, Siobhan asked, do you want us to identify the beginning, middle, and end? That's not a requirement, but if it's something that you find effective, like maybe the beginning of someone's TED Talk was really powerful because she started with a personal story, or she began with a really powerful anecdote or a startling fact. Like that could be one of the reasons why the content was appealing, or maybe that's one of the skills that the speaker specifically had. So yeah, there are ways to fold in that information. So step 1 is to watch 3 different TED Talks and think about those general questions. Step 2 is to create a handout or document for the assignment with visual elements, okay, using those questions that were outlined in step 1. So basically, you're going to write a short analysis of each TED Talk that you watched, and each analysis should include specific examples of elements that contributed to a powerful presentation or what weakened the presentation. If you really want to show off, I mean, you don't have to find flaws, but if you do notice something that you think wasn't effective, why not focus on that? That will kind of show me that you're really thinking through the material. Explain basically what worked and what did not. And those questions back on page 1 will help lead you to this. And there's a third step that you'll conclude your assignment with your own list of 10 qualities, techniques, or skills that made the presentations you watched inspiring, captivating, creative, and effective. Okay, this is from your own perspective. So that's the first writing assignment. Now, right now you might be thinking, okay, I need to create a handout or a document. What does that mean? Here's one of the most awesome and most frustrating things about this class. It's open-ended. Okay, you may use a tool that's familiar to you for this assignment. That might mean PowerPoint, or it might mean Keynote. It might be Microsoft Word, though you shouldn't just be handing in text on a page. But Microsoft Word has some templates built in. Newsletter formats, pamphlet formats. Okay, so when we use the word handout or document, we mean that in the most kind of open-minded term possible. So whatever tool you're most comfortable with, whether it's presentation software or whether it's word processing software, I'm open to even more innovative ideas. If you want to use Prezi, which I said is an online tool, let me go there real quickly. Does everybody know Prezi? Okay, Siobhan's heard of it. Okay, it's sort of like Keynote and PowerPoint, but it's much more dynamic. Okay, and you can look at examples, but Prezi could be a tool. Okay, Jelana, who I'm probably still pronouncing your name wrong, has used it and loves it. So yeah, you can use whatever tool is comfortable and familiar to you. Again, I'm not against Microsoft Word, but it shouldn't just be you opening up a Microsoft Word document, writing some paragraphs, and handing it in. Okay, there has to be visual elements. But if you can do so using Microsoft Word, or if you know how to create PDF files, or you want to make a short video, or you want to make a quick website, or use a blogging tool to create a web presence that covers this information, all that is fine. Okay, so again, it's awesome because you have so much things to choose from. It might be frustrating if you're someone who likes to be told, use this specific tool and follow these steps. And real quickly, I'm just going to, before I end this session, back to the idea of copyrighted material. So yeah, you should be using some sort of visual elements. They don't have to be images. They could be other sorts of visual designs that you add. But if you do decide to bring in images, again, you have to make sure that they are allowable. And to make sure that they're allowable, there are basically two places you should be going to. Nate says he can't hear me anymore. Is that happening to other people as well? Okay, other people can. While I'm talking, I'm okay. Nate, okay, it sounds like the problem is solved. Okay, let me wrap things up because we really are at the end of the session. Two places to go for images. Do you all know how to get to Full Sail Connect? Probably you do. I hope you've had some interaction with it. You can go to Browse Organizations to look for the library, or you can just scroll down, and the library is always here on the left. Okay, library. And if you scroll down to Research Databases, which is part of the Full Sail library, okay, so it's right here. You have this really cool tool called AP Images. AP stands for Associated Press. Okay, so you have over 3,500 photos that are added daily. These are typically photos that appear like in newspapers. And once you get into the AP Images collection, you can do a search. The great thing about AP Images is that if you're looking for a specific figure or a specific news-related issue, you'll probably find it. So if I put in the words Taylor Swift, I'll probably get lots of results. Not that you're going to watch a TED Talk about Taylor Swift. Ooh, which picture do I like the most? Oh, I love Taylor Swift. Okay, so I'll pick on this photo here. I don't know why you would put her picture in your TED Talk analysis, but let's say this helps improve your document or handout. You can then download it. Okay. The only thing you have to be careful of is that technically you should be grabbing this number here and just putting it somewhere in your document next to the picture. That tells me that it's the AP image. Because what we don't want to do, which everybody loves to do, is we just go right, and then we go to the images section of Google, and we go, ooh, let me take this picture. Oh no, let me take this picture. It's just these pictures aren't allowable, probably. I mean, will you get caught? Probably not. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube and Facebook and all sorts of websites that probably should be taken down. And Taylor Swift isn't going to come after you unless you're making money off of her image. But still, Full Sail places a lot of importance on following things to the rule. We instructors cannot just put whatever pictures we want in our materials. We can't just take copyrighted music or copyrighted clips from films and put it in our material. We follow those rules. You guys have to as well. Another useful site, so AP Images through the library database is one way to find things. Another online tool is CompFight. I'm going to go ahead and type that into the chat box. CompFight is awesome because it's a Flickr search tool, and CompFight is actually more useful if you're looking for general images. So if you're looking for a celebrity or a politician, you might not get great results. But if you're looking for sort of that perfect sort of stock image that will help your presentation, for example, I don't know, classroom. Okay, we get all these results. Make sure that you have, right now it's on any license. We don't want that. We need either Creative Commons or commercial. Technically, we should be choosing commercial because Full Sail is a for-profit university. So anything that I create for the university, anything you create as a student, technically is with under Full Sail as a sort of corporate entity. So commercial is probably the safest choice. Anything above the dotted line you have to pay for, so never go there. But then from below the dotted line, you can pick like the perfect image. So let's say this picture of the teacher with a student is helpful to you. You can click on it. You can choose what size you want, small, medium, or large. And notice here, it says some rights reserved. That's what we want. Some rights reserved means we can use that photo as long as we give credit for it. If it says all rights reserved, then we can't touch it. And the problem with just going to Google and typing in, for example, a person's name and grabbing whatever image we like is we don't know what category that falls under. So that's why I say AP Images or compfight.com is safe. And then to give credit, this is a little bit complicated. And this may not even apply to some of you. Some of you might not use these sorts of images in your assignment. But this is the full HTML. You really just need to grab the URL, which most people can spot visually, right? So there's the URL. The full HTML is only important, like, for example, if you're actually building a website and you want this in your actual code, but just grabbing the URL is significant. Okay, so there's two places you can find visual information. Okay, so questions, comments, anything that we should cover before we end today's session? Do we feel pretty clear about what we're working on this month? Do we feel confident? Do we feel energized? I think you'll like those TED Talks. I love the TED Talks. Okay, Siobhan says yes. If you feel comfortable with what we've gone over, and if you don't have any questions, you are free to go enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll hang out here for a few more minutes and answer questions. But thank you so much for attending. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.